Thank you very much. Well, it's really exciting to be addressing these compelling issues about how to support young people in the transition to adulthood in a rapidly changing, increasingly technocentric, and increasingly AI-infused world, which is filled with uncertainty and amplified. And so I want to begin actually asking Candice, who's had an incredible career examining the role of technology in adolescent development and youth development in general, to think with us about areas of major concern and major opportunity that creates a focus for what we should be doing with a new wave of rapid ways in which opportunities for work and living more generally are changing so quickly.
Yeah. Thanks, Ron, and thanks for this wonderful opening. This is a really tough act to follow up here. Lisa, wonderful talk. So we've been following young people since about 2008 on their mobile phones, and so we've seen a lot of changes in technology. We've been working with them to understand how they engage with the world, and it's been a wild ride, and it's getting wilder with artificial intelligence for sure. But I think a couple of things that we've learned along the way, and the first one might sound obvious, but I think it's actually foundational and critical, is that when we have these discussions about whatever technology is coming next, we have to center young people and what we're trying to do with them. As soon as we start centering technology and start talking about AI's effects on the teenage brain, we've lost. We've lost because we start to slip into a fear cycle. We can't see solutions, and we can no longer see the young people in front of us. But if we center what we're trying to do with and for young people, we can start to have a conversation about what are the risks and what are the opportunities in that space. I think the second thing that we've learned along the way is, the digital divide is real. And so when a new technology comes onto the scene, the most likely thing that's going to happen is it's going to amplify inequalities unless we design for that, right? And so we see this time and time again that young people growing up in really high income versus lower income households get more scaffolding, support, supervision around technologies. They get the best of what technology has to offer, right? And that doesn't happen in our lower resource settings, and that sets up for a very bad outcome, right, in terms of amplifying inequalities. But we know ways we can center youth in design, that we can get companies to center youth in design and design in ways that will reduce inequalities. And if we don't do that, we're going to have the opposite effect. And I'll just give one concrete example. Gemini released SAT prep, right? So a lot of high-income parents pay a lot of money to boost those scores. And now what would happen if that was free, right? And not only if it's free, but we can find ways, we can find the navigators in the room to start to facilitate those types of things. So I think those are really the lessons, that we can slip into fear really quickly in this space. And if we don't design with young people centered, we're going to repeat the mistakes of the past in widening inequalities versus closing them.
Thank you. And since you introduced this framework of fear of uncertainty and fear of technology as something that can distort and actually amplify the challenges, I'm going to ask Jaime, who's had some thoughts about how to help shift away from the fear frame of new technologies and promote the opportunity and excitement dimension that can be really productive and having a more positive impact with.
Well, as a young person who still has 1 year to develop their prefrontal cortex, I've been battling with that question. But one of the things that I wanted to actually uplift from Candice, what Candice was saying, was how AI is, creating inequalities, and that's what young people are afraid of. And so one of those inequalities that I'm seeing is a challenge of information, where there's not information distributed equally for all young people. So like we were talking about this earlier, but as AI is changing the job landscape so fast, young people are not able to keep up because we don't have the systems in place to distribute that information as changes are happening in real time. I don't know if any of you have seen the usage of data centers throughout the years. The last 5 years, it's rise exponentially. AI is, not slowing down. It's only increasing, and we're competing now for our own resources such as water and land. And so I think what needs to happen is We need to get young people the information on a day-to-day basis. We need to partner with employers. We need to partner with workforce boards. We need to partner with the people who are seeing those changes on the ground and then distribute that. We need to make it a public good. If we silo that information, young people are going to not have a clue. They're not going to have a strategy coming out of high school. Like, it's as early as high school. Like, what major do you choose? What does that mean for your career? How's your career path changing? So information is where I see where we need to make that change.
Thank you. Vicki, you've had enormous amount of experience and interacting with people who have studied what skills are important and increasingly important in a rapidly changing world, and what are the kinds of approaches to try to increase access to developing these skills and capacities that are going to become more important.
Yeah, so we have the privilege of studying a lot of successful systems around the world, including systems that are rapidly rising or exceptionally innovating and figuring out what is helping young people live lives of purpose and hope, because we sit on that hopeful side of the ledger. And as we think about that, there's two big things I would point to. I mean, there's lots of others, but one is when you think about the fact that everybody's living longer and young people are going to live a lot longer, then you have to think about what that whole learning ecosystem looks like across a lifetime, from how they are excellent in K-12 to what post-secondary pathways look like, to early entry into the workforce, and the fact that young people's will need to upskill and reskill many times over the course of their lifetime. So as we look at how people are thinking about skill sets around the world, there's sort of four big lenses that we work with states and systems and countries to think about. One are those core fundamental skills that we all believe young people should have, but how they apply those in increasingly interdisciplinary ways to solve those complex problems. Because one of the great things we know about this generation of young people is that they are solution seekers. The second is the sort of habits of learning and well-being, so that they continue to value and see learning as a high, quality, high impact endeavor across the course of their lifetime. And so they develop those skills of well-being that sustain them into adulthood. The third is kind of these contemporary skills that everybody's talking about. What is it that employers want now? What are they going to want in the future? Creativity has now become the second, right behind analytical thinking, in-demand skill among employers, largely because of AI and what it will take in terms of human capacity to work alongside it. So all of those contemporary skills that help you take you into modern work, collaboration, dealing with failure, all those things that have already been talked about. And then the last one, and this one equally important, and our keynote speaker framed this beautifully, which is that set of sort of contemporary and non-contemporary community skills that enable young people to have this sense of connection and belonging, to feel like they're part of something larger than themselves, and all of the ethical decision-making and other kinds of things that takes. So those four categories, but thinking about them differently and how we create the solutions and the pathways for young people to acquire those skills. Thinking about that is as important as thinking more broadly about the skill set they need.
Thanks. So Mimi, another set of capacities that we think are increasingly important for the humanity amidst all of the technology is relational skills, connection, increasing human-to-human interaction in ways that are, as we've heard numerous times already, and the feelings associated with that. What are insights and approaches for promoting that dimension of skills and capabilities for young people?
Yeah, thank you. I loved all of your comments. And, I have to say that there's so much possibility, as Candice was sharing, to really recreate and create communities around these young people in a way that we have not done a very good job in this country. I'm going to just say that. Our focus, National Youth Employment Coalition, is on those young people that aren't currently working or in school or in a training program, those that are in most need of those opportunities that are out there, and who we often don't see in our communities, and people don't see in their communities because they're not as plugged in. And so how are we prioritizing those populations, and how are we reconnecting and connecting them, not just to services and programs and educational opportunities, but to people and caring adults? Lisa said it best. It's very bright, but I think you're there. And, there are opportunities to do that with technology. Certainly we have more connectivity through Zoom and things like that. But we really, to be able to have that connection, social capital for this group of people, disproportionately represented by youth experiencing homelessness, foster care youth, criminal legal system involved youth, young people of color, and that do not have the social capital, which we know is one of the most important factors in acquiring a good job, right? So how are we building that and thinking about ways that we can positively use AI to do that? And then in terms of the skills, just to echo Vicki, those communication skills and how you go to an event such as this as a young person and connect with people and feel confident. And I laughed at Lisa's story about young people going right to the top. We have an event in the fall that's a Youth Days event that's we go on Capitol Hill with all kinds of young people from across the country. And I took a group of 3 young women to 3 federal agencies, the top leaders at those agencies. One was to the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, Liz Ryan, the administrator who was running it at the time. And they were very prepared for us to come with these young people. These 3 young women had decided, I said, this is your thing. You guys figure out what you want to say to these administrators. And one young woman was identified as the lead for that. She went right in there, sat at the head of the table. I think Liz Ryan thought she was going to lead the meeting. No. She was like, well, 16 years old, and she told her what for, what we need. And so much of that was about that human connection. And she, heartbreaking story about nobody knew that I was living on the streets. I was in school, but nobody knew. And so what are those systems in communities that we're building to be able to foster that connection? And what are there's so many assets in this room right now in terms of, training and education and research. And how are we, though, pulling that together for a community in such a way that we can really build sustainable, connected systems that don't have silos, that are easy to navigate. I know somebody is in the room, Paige, if you're here, working on public benefits. We had great conversations last night about things to integrate into these systems. So one of the things that we do, and I get to work with Jaime, who, can I tell? So Jaime is coming, we met him through a program through Annie Casey, your LEAP program, and he is now one of my, I can't say favorite because we have another.
Up there.
One of our greatest employees who is innovative, proactive. So those skills, to be able to work in a team, but I think we can't have really defined roles because the world is changing so fast. We need to be flexible in how we organize ourselves and be able to think about, what's the next thing? And so I just want to, share, we've been working on this Youth Champion Communities project, which really is about building those ecosystems in those communities for those young people. We've been, around for 47 years with the focus on these young people, and it's still, a very fractured system. Within that ecosystem development, we're working with employers, we're working with programs, we're working with mayors, we're working with, young people at the forefront in developing that leadership. We need other partners to do bring this to more communities and to continually enhance those ecosystems, including integrating that adolescent brain development research and doing more trainings. I will share, and this is the last thing, but 30 years ago, I was working in a program that served foster care youth when I was 12. No. And they really, there was new research that had just come out about let youth lead. And most of the systems back then were not about youth leading, I gotta say. So we really started to like, okay, you develop the policy around homework, or you develop the policy around the, it makes everybody's job so much easier that works with these young people, like, because if they're setting their own rules, then they're gonna follow them and they'll hold each other accountable. And it was amazing. So, having seen this journey of adolescent brain development in programs and the opportunities that it creates. But I have to say, we need more training. We need to scale this training around adolescent brain development. Probation officers, we had a good talk last night about training probation officers, so very exciting programs, but we need to do all the probation officers. So it's, we need to do this work together. And so really, really excited to be here and connect with all of you.
Thank you. A lot of exciting ideas. I just want to focus on a few themes that are emerging from what we've been talking about so far, which is in some ways a contrast to the technology that is the concern. It's about connection. It's about creativity. It's about relational learning that is going to support young people to be able to take advantage of some of these opportunities. And so I want to challenge us a bit because there are a lot of threats to how young people have these feelings of caring connection that promote the collaboration and creativity that we think are going to be increasingly valuable. What are the things at the level of systems and policies that can help increase these, whatever, it's not simply durable skills or soft skills, but these human connection, collaboration, and the feelings that support that. I love the term coaching rather than, there's the metaphors and stories are really, really important here, building on the science. And how do we translate that to address policies and systems? Whether they're examples you have or approaches that you think, at this point, we're going to just throw it out to whoever wants to.
I'll start. I think one thing we have to do is move to a new normal about how we think about the involvement of young people in their own education and in our systems. I mean, part of it is, we have long talked about, oh yes, we give students a voice, but it's a very perfunctory, kind of lowest common denominator sort of thing. And I think we have to move to a place where we trust and where we are doing co-design with young people in all sorts of ways. I mean, one of the things we know about this generation of young people is that they really do like intergenerational collaboration. So putting them at the table to help design solutions, they came out of COVID with more experience and knowledge than most of us did about what a new education system should look like that really works for them. And we should bring them to the table in really deep ways. And, I'll give you one example that we're doing. We're helping incubate a little organization that is training all of the student board members in the country. So all the students that sit on school boards, all the students that sit on state boards, and they're working to advocate for every state to do that. And we are just helping them incubate. That is run by young people. They design everything, and we just get to be their coaches until they are ready to be their own self-sustaining org. So I think this kind of voice and the comment, I couldn't agree more around the storytelling piece. We have to lift up all of these examples of powerful, positive solution seeking that young people are doing and are capable of doing in all of these co-design and connection opportunities.
Yeah, just to build on that, Mimi. Vicki. So Larissa May runs half of the story, and I don't know if any of you have seen this, but this is an amazing organization that is connecting networks of training student leaders. And the big thing that we have to accept as adults is that we're not very good at this, right? So young people are early enthusiastic adopters of all these technologies, and we have a lot of assumptions about what they can and want to do in these spaces. But as Lisa said, these are the third spaces now. This is where they've gone to collaborate, to build. And if we don't pause for a second and try and understand what they're bringing to those spaces and what they can teach us, we're going to fail again on the policy front, because we'll be designing policy that's just going to miss the mark in terms of what they really need. So half the story, I would check it out. It's a fantastic organization.
So when we think about opportunity in AI, something I think about often is we tend to focus on how entry-level jobs are going away, right? But there is some other opportunities for young people, which is that AI does make an individual far more efficient, and it gives them the ability to iterate quickly. And so entrepreneurship is going to benefit from AI, because now before you needed to get a bunch of like a team of other young people who would be crazy enough to do this for no pay. Right. But now you can whip at AI to help you like build all these things, and it's gotten really good at coding, so software development is less of a barrier. I personally, when I was in studying here at UCLA, I had this higher than thou mentality where I was not going to use AI while I was studying until I took econometrics, and I was just expected to know how to code. I guess I missed a class at some point. But AI was so good at teaching me, and I now know how to do statistical analysis through RStudio, which is something I would have never been able to learn. Like, I don't know how I would have done that by myself in the past, or like as quickly as I did, maybe like as efficiently as I did. So efficiency has grown, and there are opportunities where young people can take advantage of that efficiency and take autonomy of that work. Going both ways in the workforce right now.
Great example. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to do one last round before we break for the table discussion. I want to challenge us to say, where should we focus a lens or a spotlight on where research and partnerships can be addressing the compelling questions? Because we can't wait for traditional science to answer these questions about what's changing and what's going to happen. So we're going to need to take a creative approach to how do we increase the knowledge base and evidence base for things that are rapidly changing. So where would any of you like to propose are particularly compelling questions that we need to understand better to be effective at accomplishing these goals?
I could start. First I would say that two things. One is we need to start in the schools, but we also have to realize there's a lot of young people that aren't in schools. And, I want to just challenge everyone to, do you know who these young people are in your communities? And if you don't, then how can you figure that out? And I think that technology can play a role in helping us understand what the denominator is of youth experiencing that disconnection and how we can get services to them. It seems like a pretty simple thing, but it's not happening. How can we have shared metrics to see what's working? So creating those shared metrics, Jaime and I have been working on this for the communities that we're in, but let's see, what's working and be able to compare programs, compare success, compare what's working. So that's just one avenue. I think also that there is already a lot, not that we don't need more, but there's a lot of research that's out there that is not accessible or getting used in communities. So how are we connecting the dots? And like our organization, we love new, compelling research, but we need support to implement it. But there's some great things that are happening out there around this population of youth. And we know how to implement it, but we need to be able to do that. And how are we doing that at scale? I'm going to stop there, but those are two, I think, really important areas.
How do we take advantage of an opportunity? Like, I'm always feeling like you shouldn't let an opportunity go to waste. And right now in the country, there is a tremendous amount of focus on career-connected learning, which opens the door to think about the redesign of upper secondary in a way we have never thought about it in the US, but lots of other countries have, in which young people get choice, they get put on a trajectory, lots of these skills continue to come to fruition. I mean, that can happen all the way through the system, and where young people get to help design that, and where, unlike our efforts in the past, there's no dead ends attached to it. And there are some beautiful examples across the world of how that can be done. And at a time when employers are worried about the pipeline, AI is a huge factor. The world is so rapidly changing. Figuring that out when everybody's attention's on it feels like we could get a domino effect on some of the other things that we've been talking about in this room.
So I have kind of a fun example. So in Orange County, we have Road Trip Nation. So if anyone's heard of Road Trip Nation, they, basically two guys who didn't know what they wanted to do, and they didn't want to do what their parents did. So they got a van and they toured the country and they interviewed all kinds of people about their jobs and what their passion was and how they got there. And so, thousands and thousands of, tape, but then they realized not everybody can just jump in a van and go figure out what their passion is. So they've been working on kind of mining all of these videos to help kind of counselors, career counselors work with young people that instead of taking that test, circle the dot and we'll figure out what you could be when you grow up, they engage with an agent, right? So they engage with an LLM, they get fed stories and videos that might fit their profile of where they want to be. Now, I'm not saying we don't know that this is effective yet, but this is a kind of creative way that we can bring in all of this information. We can start to personalize and engage the career pathway work and thinking about it and, breaking with some of our more traditional models, which we know probably didn't work that well in the past, and given this uncertain future are not going to be that predictive either. So those kinds of organizations have just been really inspiring to see how they leverage the tech to fit what kids are interested in.
They're on like PBS now, too.
They are. They're a great group of.
So I'll be brief because now we have a little time, but I was reading this Substack by this labor economist on how employers are going about managing the relationship between AI and their workers. And one thing is because of how the dynamic between an employee and their company, employees stay at companies for much less time and they move around quickly. And so a lot of employers are not willing to put in the capital and the time to develop how that really interconnected way that employees and AI can work together, and instead result to cost cutting, which is removing the workers themselves. And so one of the solutions that they propose is having, perhaps government programs or some kind of coalition that makes that development process a public good. Because in that way, everybody is able to pitch in and everybody's able to benefit. And companies are going to be less scared of, training their employees to deal with AI and then them leaving and taking those learnings for free to some other company.
Thank you.
I just add really quickly to that too. We have a employer council, a champion employer council with a lot of bigger national employers, and one of the things that comes up frequently is things are changing so rapidly. What do we do to keep up so that we don't have to let people go? How can we upskill them on the job? And I think developing those tools, working with researchers and folks that have done this already, is how do we bring the ability for, those companies and those employees to upskill themselves. And, what does that look like? And how do we bring that to more places than it is right now?
I just wanted to very briefly point to two things that came up as we were talking. One is how, as much as we think about work and financial, the clear evidence that young people want to contribute and feeling valued through contribution is so essential, and including that, and how important communities and building communities that are supporting, and communities to create that feedback loop so young people are not only succeeding, they're really feeling recognized and valued for their contributions feels like such an important frame that helps us be more effective in some of this. And it's been a theme that's come up in a couple other ways. And I think this is a nice way to think not just about economic aspects of work and being successful, but also at this emotional level of what supports young people on that bridge in that, so they're not alone. So, thanks. Thank you. It was a great first session. Look forward to a lot more discussion.
Thank you, guys.